All right, let's just step right into the vault here. Welcome to this explainer, but I need to warn you right up front, this isn't just a simple, nostalgic story about a business that couldn't quite keep up with the times. No, what we're looking at today is a corporate autopsy. It's a heavy, suspenseful, slow-motion postmortem of a fallen titan. Think of it like a heist film in reverse. We are going to examine, piece by piece, how an absolute behemoth was systematically dismantled by its own success, its own hubris, and an invisible, relentless tide of disruption. We're going to strip away all the nostalgia and look at the cold, hard mechanics of failure.
9,094. I really want you to let that sink in. This wasn't just a large company. It was an invincible, global retail juggernaut. That was the peak global store count of an empire that literally commanded Friday nights for an entire generation. It was an empire that felt as permanent as the pavement its stores were built on.
And then there's this number, 1. A single, solitary digit. The absolute gravity of this contrast is just staggering. We are about to map the steep, terrifying cliff between absolute global domination and near total extinction. Because you have to ask yourself, how does a massive, multi-billion-dollar empire vaporize into a single surviving artifact?
Now, to really understand the fall, you first have to understand the sheer, overwhelming invincibility of the peak. Back in 2004, Blockbuster was the undisputed king of home entertainment. They were pulling in $5.9 billion in revenue. They had 65 million members globally. But here is the stat that just absolutely blows my mind. They were opening a brand new physical store every 17 hours. I mean, they were literally stamping their gold ticket on the map with a brick-and-mortar footprint so dense, so inescapable, that no competitor could even breathe in their shadow.
So how did they build this fortress? The genesis of their absolute dominance started back in 1985 with David Cook and later Wayne Huizenga, who fundamentally understood the power of scale. They pioneered a model of massive inventory. You see, while your local mom-and-pop video store had maybe 1 or 2 copies of a hit movie, Blockbuster had entire walls of them. And this aggressive scaling worked so brilliantly that by 1994, media conglomerate Viacom swooped in and bought them for an unprecedented $8.4 billion, just to finance even more expansion. It was a golden machine. But the machine got a massive upgrade in 1998. CEO John Antioco revolutionized their retail economics. Before this, video stores paid about $65 up front for every single VHS tape. It was incredibly capital-intensive. But Antioco, he struck a genius deal with Hollywood, dropped the upfront cost of a tape to just $1 single, and in exchange, Blockbuster would share 40% of the rental revenue with the studios. This revenue-sharing engine allowed them to completely flood their shelves with high-demand hit movies. Almost overnight, they captured 31% of the total U.S. market. They were untouchable.
But underneath all that success, there was a dark secret hiding inside those massive profit margins, a fatal financial addiction. Blockbuster was making $800 million, a full 16% of their total revenue, entirely from late fees. Really think about the psychology of that for a second. Their highest margin revenue stream was generated by actively penalizing their best, most frequent customers. It bred this deep, quiet consumer resentment. But for the executives, that $800 million was a drug they simply could not quit. Which brings us right to the collision course. On one side, you have the gold incumbent, Blockbuster, built on massive brick-and-mortar infrastructure, delivering immediate gratification, but fundamentally reliant on penalty-driven economics. And then, on the other side, glowing ominously in red, a disruptor emerges in 1997, a tiny mail-order startup. Sure, they lacked immediate gratification because you had to wait days for a DVD in the mail, but they offered a subscription-driven model with absolutely no late fees. They explicitly designed their business to solve the very pain point Blockbuster was addicted to.
And this sets the stage for what is honestly the most dramatic scene in modern business history. It's spring 2000. The startup is burning through cash. The dot-com bubble is bursting all around them. Desperate, they travel to Blockbuster's headquarters in Dallas to offer themselves up on a silver platter for $50 million. Just $50 million! Sitting across the table is the undisputed king of entertainment, holding all the cards, all the cash, and the entire market.
Those startup founders were Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph of Netflix. And as the story goes, CEO John Antioco literally struggled not to laugh. The executives at Blockbuster dismissed Netflix as a very small, unprofitable niche business. To them, it was just a cash-burning DVD-by-mail service. To the titan on top of the mountain, this tiny red blip posed absolutely no real threat to their global empire. The offer was swiftly and arrogantly declined.
Now here's the absolutely crucial point. It is incredibly easy for us to sit here today and call Blockbuster's executives stupid. But it wasn't stupidity. It was something much more insidious. It was structural paralysis. This is a textbook, lethal case of the innovator's dilemma. You see, a legacy company simply cannot easily abandon billions of dollars in existing, guaranteed physical revenues to chase a speculative, unproven, cash-burning digital model. The Blockbuster executives were structurally incentivized to protect their $6 billion retail margin and optimize the present. They were physically incapable of self-cannibalization. Think about it. If they launched a massive subscription service with no late fees, they would instantly destroy their own $800 million cash cow. They were captured by their own success. They didn't ignore the future because they were blind. They ignored it because their present was just too profitable to disrupt.
But here's the thing about the future. It doesn't wait for your profit margins to adjust. The ground started shifting, and what follows is a rapid, devastating cascade of failures. Over just 6 short years, we see these desperate maneuvers to survive. A doomed tech partnership in 2000, a late entry into the online space in 2004, the agonizing elimination of late fees in 2005, all culminating in a violent boardroom coup in 2006. Let's break these down, because the suspense here is in how everything they tried only tightened the noose.
The tragedy actually begins with a shocking piece of historical irony. Blockbuster did see the digital streaming future early. In July 2000, they attempted a massive leapfrog maneuver straight to video on demand. They signed an ambitious 20-year broadband streaming deal. But look at who they chose as their technology partner, Enron. Yeah, so when Enron collapsed in that spectacular, fraudulent scandal in late 2001, Blockbuster's entire digital strategy was completely derailed, setting them back critical years while Netflix just quietly kept growing.
By 2004, the existential threat of Netflix was undeniable. Blockbuster finally decided to fight a digital war. But look at the cost of retaliation. They poured $200 million into building digital infrastructure for Blockbuster Online. Worse, to compete, they finally bit the bullet and eliminated late fees in 2005. While this successfully drove traffic, it mathematically broke the company. They were willingly hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars in critical, lifeblood cash flow just to stay in the ring.
And that level of cash burn? It triggers panic. As profits violently plunged 28% from the cost of the online war, activist investor Carl Icahn rebelled. He looked at the heavy digital spend and the massive drop in profits and orchestrated a bitter, ruthless boardroom coup over strategy and executive compensation. He forced CEO John Antioco out in 2007. And the tragic irony of it all? The new leadership was explicitly tasked with pulling back from the digital war and returning focus to physical retail, right as the digital age was truly dawning.
But the real, fatal blow was entirely invisible to consumers. By 2010, Wall Street and Hollywood were smelling blood in the water. Historically, Hollywood studios gave Blockbuster 90-day credit terms to buy all those DVDs. But fearing default, the studios suddenly panicked. They revoked the credit and demanded cash in advance, overnight, instantly. This single demand vaporized over $300 million in liquidity. The vault was completely empty. The giant was paralyzed.
And that is when the gold finally shattered. On September 23, 2010, the $6 billion retail Leviathan officially broke, filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were crushed under approximately $1 billion in insurmountable debt. They were destroyed by internal strategic paralysis, external disruption, and an absolute inability to safely transition massive physical overhead into a lightweight digital era.
Let's review the final autopsy numbers here. The math of this destruction is just chilling. From a peak historic valuation of around $8.4 billion, they plummeted into a $1 billion debt hole. At the final bankruptcy auction, the entire global remnant of this empire was sold off for pennies on the dollar, just $320 million. And the final, most brutal metric of all? Surviving corporate-owned stores, 0. A total, absolute wipeout.
The final act is really just a story of scavengers picking through the debris. In April 2011, Dish Network purchased the remaining fractured assets at that bankruptcy auction. But there was no grand revival, no heroic comeback. It was merely a slow, systematic dismantling. By January 2014, Dish had officially shuttered the last of the corporate-owned stores. The empire was swept into the dustbin of corporate history. Which leaves us with this haunting reality. Out of over 9,000 global locations, today a single franchise in Bend, Oregon stands alone. It survives not as a viable global business model, but as a nostalgic tourist attraction. It's a lonely, glowing monument to a very harsh truth. Past success guarantees absolutely nothing about future survival. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought as we close out this explainer. Look at the structures, the habits, and the dependencies in your own industry or even your own career. The Blockbuster autopsy proves that the things making you the most money today can be the exact anchors that drag you under tomorrow. In an era of constant, relentless disruption, are you actively building the future, or are you just trying to protect a late fee?
Today, there is a single location operating in Bend, Oregon. This map illustrates the company's scale a decade prior. In 2004, Blockbuster sat at the center of home entertainment, generating $5.9 billion in revenue. They operated over 9,000 stores worldwide, opening a new location every 17 hours. That physical footprint made them inescapable. The massive blue and yellow storefronts anchored nearly every major retail intersection in America. When a company controls that much physical territory, the sheer volume of foot traffic creates a powerful illusion of permanence. But that massive retail footprint was masking a deep structural vulnerability. In 1998, CEO John Antioco engineered a radical change in how the company secured its inventory. Instead of paying Hollywood $65 upfront for every VHS tape, Blockbuster acquired inventory for almost nothing, splitting the rental revenue. This removed their inventory cap, allowing them to stock hundreds of hit movies and capture 31% of the US market almost immediately. But the model hid a toxic dependency. 16% of total revenue, roughly $800 million, was generated entirely by late fees. The company was extracting its highest margins by heavily penalizing its most frequent customers. In the spring of 2000, a small mail-order DVD startup offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million. Blockbuster declined the offer. This chart illustrates the innovator's trap they faced. They had a $6 billion retail engine to protect, heavily subsidized by those late fees. Acquiring a cash-burning digital startup required cannibalizing their own highly profitable physical infrastructure. The financial mechanics that drove their peak success structurally prevented them from taking the risk. This graphic compares the two colliding economics. Blockbuster relied on immediate gratification and penalty-driven revenue. The startup bypassed physical stores entirely, utilizing mail-order logistics and a flat, subscription-driven model with zero late fees. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph designed Netflix explicitly to solve the consumer resentment caused by Blockbuster's penalty system. Blockbuster did attempt an early transition to digital. In July 2000, they signed a massive 20-year agreement to deliver video on demand over broadband. To build the infrastructure, they partnered with a dominant technology and energy conglomerate, Enron. When Enron collapsed under massive accounting fraud in late 2001, Blockbuster's entire digital pipeline was destroyed with it. By tying their future to a fraudulent partner, Blockbuster lost its capital and the most critical resource in a tech war, time. By 2004, Netflix was gaining massive traction. Blockbuster retaliated, pouring $200 million into developing their own online platform. To fully match the Netflix model, they eliminated late fees entirely. That decision intentionally vaporized over $400 million in projected revenue. Without a financial penalty to force returns, consumer behavior shifted overnight. Customers began to hoard their rentals, trapping high-demand movies in living rooms instead of turning them over on store shelves. The bold strategy drove foot traffic and successfully increased their subscriber count, but the operational costs of maintaining thousands of physical stores remained fixed while incoming cash flow plummeted. In order to successfully wound their competitor, Blockbuster ultimately had to sever its own most vital financial artery. As the cash drain caused profits to plunge 28%, a rebellion erupted in the boardroom. Activist investor Carl Icahn acquired a massive stake in the company and aggressively campaigned to halt the heavy spending on digital infrastructure. A bitter dispute over strategy and executive bonuses forced Antioco out. The board installed new leadership with a strict mandate to pull back from the online war and return focus to physical retail. At the exact moment the digital transition required absolute, unified commitment, a divided leadership paralyzed the company from within. The final blow occurred out of public view. Watching the internal chaos and fearing default, Hollywood studios abruptly revoked Blockbuster's historic 90-day credit terms. Suppliers demanded cash in advance for all new inventory, instantly vaporizing over $300 million in operating liquidity. Carrying roughly $1 billion in accumulated debt and lacking the cash to stock new releases, the company broke. On September 23, 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The remnants of a $6 billion empire went to a bankruptcy option. Dish Network purchased the assets for just $320 million. By January 2014, the final corporate-owned stores were systematically shuttered and liquidated. Today, that single franchise location remains. It stands to show us that massive physical scale offers no protection against technological disruption. They were ultimately crushed by the weight of their own past success.